Councillor Buchanan. I can see that you are present, Councillor Dewar. I can see that you've also joined. Also present today are Councillors Ferguson and Gowland. Councillor Keat. I'm not seeing you present. Also present today are Councillors Lockhart, Mars, McAdams and Nugent. We have a number of officers present, and with that I'll pass you back to the Chair to commence today's business. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Elizabeth Ann. Okay, if we can move on to item number 1, which is if there's any declarations of interest. There doesn't seem to be any. Thank you. Moving on to item number 2, and that's the minutes of previous meeting, pages 3 to 6. And if we can agree those minutes, please.
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mars. Moving on to item number 3, and that's the Capital Budget Monitoring 2023 to 2024, the General Fund Capital Programme, pages 7 to 14. And if I can hand over to Lorraine to take us through it.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. And thank you for your kind words at the start, Chair. Item 3 then is the first of a couple of old year reports, which we are obliged to bring along to the forum in terms of meeting audit expectations, but also to give you a final position on where we outturned at the end of the financial year. So the first one then is the Capital Budget Monitoring Report for 23-24 for the General Fund Capital Programme. In section 4 on page 7, you can see the General Services Capital Programme for the year totaled 78.365 million. And in section 4.2, we note that we spent 64.244 million. So we had an underspend of just over £14 million. The details of that underspend are shown across the resources in section 4.2. And in section 4.3, we're really noting the rationale, the reason for the underspend, which is mainly the timing of spend across the 2 financial years, which is fairly common when you're looking at large-scale capital projects. The main projects are detailed in Appendix B in relation to those that have underspent, and it gives you an idea of the estimated completion dates for those projects into the new financial year. Section 4.4 notes the year-end accounting adjustments that we made to correctly identify spend as either revenue or capital spend, and that's for the purposes of our annual accounts. In terms of the figures, we had 6.311 million of capital spend that should have been recorded as revenue, and conversely, we had 161,000 of revenue spend that we felt would be better recorded as capital. That's for the purposes of our annual accounts only, and we're noting there in section 4.5 that capital spend for the year in terms of accounting practice is 58.094 million. That has no impact on project delivery, no impact on funding, it's just an accounting transaction. Section 4.6 notes the position that we had for the 23-24 pay award. This is quite unusual. As part of the Council's capital funding package for the year, we were allocated 7.116 million by the Scottish Government to fund the pay award in the revenue account. In order to facilitate that, we had to route that general capital grant through the housing accounts with a subsequent transfer to the General Services Revenue account. Now, this was all permitted in the grant award from the Government. Again, no impact on projects or funding, it's just the route and the mechanism to get that money to the right place. Section 4.7 of this report notes the carry forward for 24-25, and as I said, we had an underspend of just over 14 million, and that carries into the new financial year. The New Year report is a separate report to this forum, so we'll come on to that in a minute. If I can just take you through the appendices then. Appendix A on page 10 gives you the detail across the individual services of the Council, arriving at the total spend figure of 64 million at the bottom right-hand corner of that page. On the next page, you can see that 64 million carrying through, and we take out the accounting adjustments to get us to a position of £58 million worth of spend partway down that page. And then the remainder of that page explains how we funded that £58 million across the different funding elements of our programme. And the biggest one of those is the government grant. It's followed closely by prudential borrowing, which is all for approved projects. On page 12, you can see Appendix B, as I mentioned, which are the projects that underspent in the old financial year and are carrying into the new year. And they cover 2 pages there for your information. And that's all I would highlight in that report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lorraine. Do we have any questions with regards to that section? Councillor McAdams, sorry.
No, you're fine. Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. One that I wanted to ask, it's pretty much one I want to ask in every single one of the papers, and it's to do with the climate change, sustainability and environmental implications. I feel as if it's we've just basically put out a bland statement that just gets copied and pasted in each of the reports, even though some of the reports are very thorough about the different implications they're doing, whether it's to do with heat pumps or whatever else. So I just want to bring that to your attention for people to have a think about, and then we can have a chat about it. But the items in this paper that I specifically wanted to go through, Chair, was for the agenda item 3 on the Appendix A, which is on page 11. I wanted to reference point 3.2, which was on page 7, where it talked about the Glasgow City Region City deal, and it was like 3,995,000. I just, if you could just help me out, because obviously I have been off long-term sick and I'm just getting back and trying to get back into the swing of things. What is the amount of money that's left to our authority from the city deal? I know that on another committee there was, I think it was 30 million that was taken out of the money that we had, and I just wanted to know what money is it that's left in the city deal. My next question, Chair, is in Appendix B, page 12, under point 4.3 for on page 7. It mentions South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture booking and admission system under the heading Community and Enterprise Resources. I just wasn't sure why we were paying for this. And I just wanted to know what exactly it was, seen as far as I was aware, a lot of the halls weren't running after a certain date. And sorry, if you could just indulge me, I've got 2 more. The other one was, again, Appendix B on page 12, where it mentioned Calder Glen Country Park, and it was talking about the one-way system and infrastructure. I just wanted to make sure that the officers, when they were doing this, that they could actually confirm that the drainage was getting fixed, because it had been an ongoing problem in Calder Glen, and officers had been up and met me among with other councillors a number of years ago, and we knew that the fault lay with the council because of the blue dye that was put through the drain that then basically appeared on the rugby pitch. So I just wanted to make sure that that was actually being tackled. And the final point I just wanted to know was in Appendix B on page 2. It was the Crawfordite Primary School, the toilet adaptations. I just didn't know what they were, and if it was something that the builder should have done. Therefore, was that money that that we could claim back? Anyway, thank you, Grant.
That's a few questions. Thank you very much. Thanks, Monique. I don't know, Lorraine, if there's anything you can answer there for us.
Hello. Hi, Councillor McAdams. It's nice to see you back.
Thank you.
I can answer a couple of them, probably not all of them, but I'll give a go with what I can, and the other ones we can come back to you through the chair by email, if that's okay.
Much appreciated.
In terms of the climate change and your commentary there about it being a kind of standard wording, there is an element of that through a few of the reports, but probably what I would say is that in advance of setting the capital programme for every year, we do a thorough climate change and sustainability assessment. I'm sure that's not the right name. But that process has been gone through in terms of all the projects that we've got in the capital programme. So it's done at the start rather than doing it right the way throughout the year, if you like. If there's anything else that we're bringing in new to the programme, then the relevant officers within the resources, again, should be working with community and enterprise resources in terms of any climate and sustainability impacts. And that's something that we're trying to roll out even further and just make sure that people know that and know what their duties and responsibilities are. And I'm not sure if that's part of the kind of overall one-stop shop assessment type process that we're trying to get to as a council, but there's a lot of things that we do need to cover in terms of making sure we're ticking all the boxes appropriately, doing all the right assessments in terms of the new consumer duties, a new one, quality impact assessment, climate assessment. So I think that work's being taken forward by Ian Strachan in Legal Services, but it's certainly on our radar, and it's certainly something we do pick up on when we set both the capital programme and the revenue programme at the start of the year. In terms of the city deal, particularly in your question in terms of what money's left in the city deal, and I'm thinking you're thinking grant allocation. I don't know that figure off the top of my head, sorry. That city deal grant and programme has been in play for a number of years. So we have carried out a number of projects. We have had an amount of money in terms of grant. We still have a number of projects that we are taking forward over the next few years. So I don't know the figure off the top of my head, but I can certainly try and get a position statement for you, and I'll bring that back to you. In terms of the booking and admission system, I think you made a comment there about a lot of the halls aren't being used. It's not just halls, as far as I understand it, it's the whole system across all of the establishments. And I think from the perspective of the council, I don't know the origins of the requirement for the IT system, but from the council's perspective, we do own all the buildings, and I think there's some element of ownership in terms of some of the other pieces of infrastructure. So I think from an IT perspective, we've actively been involved in that project for a few years now. It's been on the agenda for a few years. In terms of Calder Glen Country Park, I'm sorry, I don't have any details on that project, but I'll pick that up with grounds colleagues and come back to you on that one. And in terms of Crawford Dyke Primary School Nursery toilet adaptation, sorry, I'm not sure of that either. I don't know if that's a standalone piece of work or whether it's a continuation of something else. So again, I'll have to pick that up with the resource. I don't know if Derek's online. He might be able to help us with that if we come on to... Is he available?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I am able to answer that one, Lorraine, thank you. The toilet adaptations at Crawford Dyke Primary, Councillor McAdams, is actually when we built the new nursery next door. These are the toilets in the existing building that have to be made into mainstream primary school size toilets. So it's not actually as a consequence of something that the builder's done wrong. It's because we've moved the nursery out into a separate building and we're really utilising the toilets that were there for primary kids.
That's excellent. Chair, can I ask one more question, please? And Derek, thank you. Helpful as always.
No problem at all, Monique.
It was just one last thing I wanted to ask, and it was, Derek, this is probably for you as well. It was the Brandon Gate adaptations. Was, again, because I've not been in council, was that to make it more disability friendly?
To do with the front entrance ramp at Brandon Gate entrance. And that's another piece of work that has been put off because of the cost that was coming back for it. But we're now going to have to press that ahead in this financial year. That's
great. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor McAdams. Is there any other questions? Do you want to ask anything else? No.
No, thank you very much.
Okay, can we agree the report, please?
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mars. Okay, if we move on to item number 4, it's the Capital Budget Monitoring 2023-2024 Housing Capital Programme, pages 15 to 20. And if I can hand back to Lorraine again.
Thank you. So on page 15 then we have the old year position for the housing capital programme. Section 4 notes the programme for the year was 67.443 million. And we had actual spend of 62.240 million, so we were 5.2 million less than the budget. That's really down to the timing of the purchase of land at sites within the East Kilbride Community Growth Area and Brackenhill Farm in Hamilton, and they settled early in the new financial year, so they were just over the cusp of the year end, which means that we can't account for them in the old financial year. In addition, as we'd been trailing throughout last year, there were access issues with a significant number of central heating system upgrades and windows and doors projects, which were causing us to realise an underspend at the end of the year. Taking into account the year-end underspend means a carry forward of the 5.2 million, which will fall into future financial years. And further analysis of that budget confirmed that 3.418 was required in the current financial year, 2024-25, with the remainder being required into a future year. In addition, in section 4.4 at the top of page 16, we're noting there the Scottish Government's affordable housing grant for 24-25 had been confirmed, and we did see a reduction in our allocation of 3.473 million, so we reduced our approved programme to take account of that. Section 4.6 notes again the pay award and the fact that we routed the general fund revenue budget pay award through the housing capital programme, as we were permitted to do by the terms of the grant. And again, no impact bottom line in terms of the projects or financially, it's just an accounting mechanism. Appendix A to your report then shows the overall position. So you can see at the top there on page, it's jumped. On page 18, you've got your budget of 67.4, your actual spend of 62.2, and then the funding of that programme being the 62.2. And again, we're noting there the general capital grant coming in of 7.116, and then a transfer to the general services via the capital funded from current revenue line. The next page in your pack is page 19, and that shows the trend in terms of the budget and the spend across the year for the housing capital programme. And that's all for that report, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. Are there any questions? Councillor McAdams.
Hi, thanks, Chair. This will not be as lengthy as the last one. I wanted to ask about number 4C for the Housing Capital Programme, the final outturn position. It talks about a significant number of central heating systems, upgrades, and also windows and doors projects. So it was just so that Lorraine didn't or knew that I wasn't being mean to her. That it was an example like that I had wanted to point out with regards to number 7 when it was talking about the sustainability, because it kind of like one part would contradict the other part. So I think if it's something that even though it's mentioned, the central heating system is mentioned to do with upgrades in the windows and door projects that will have a difference and will make a difference with regards to sustainability and whatever else, even if at number 7, when it's talking under the heading of the climate change and sustainability and the environmental impacts, even if it just says, you know, this is covered in such and such a paper or whatever, just because this is such an important committee, because this is effectively the one that signs off so many of the other committees, and because it is a monitor, and I know it's a monitoring item and not an item for decision, but I just think because it's a monitoring one, we need to be I just think we need to be really specific in what we're actually like signing off, so people know we're actually taking it seriously.
Oh, thank you, Councillor McAdams. Is any response to that, Lorraine?
Thanks, Chair. No, not particularly. I understand your comment, Councillor McAdams. I don't think you were being mean at all. I think you were just making your point, and I understand where you're coming from. We'll take that into consideration when we're preparing the next reports. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, and Chair, thank you very much.
No, thank you, Councillor McAdams. So can we agree the report?
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mars. Okay, moving on. Item number 5, that's the Capital Budget Monitoring 2024 to 2025, the General Fund Capital Programme, pages 21 to 44. And if I can hand over to Lorraine again, please.
Thank you. So this is the first of the 2 New Year reports for the capital programme, the General Fund programme starting on page 21. Now this is quite a detailed report and I'll try and go through it in chunks and keep it as simple as I can. And it's really because it's quite iterative to get to where we are now. Originally we had a budget set back in February 2024 of 49.512 million, and we're noting that in section 4.1. We have carried out a number of adjustments to the programme as we've gone through the financial year so far, and we've also tried to take account of what we think we can realistically spend in terms of a current year programme. So a full list of the adjustments is included in Appendix A, and I'll come on to them in a second. But they take us from the original budget of 49.5 to a revised base budget of 73.850. If I take you over to section 4.2, that then notes 2 further sets of adjustments that were approved by Executive Committee on the 26th of June and on the 7th of August. And again, these adjustments are noted in Appendices B and C for your information. These then take the programme for the year to 85.248 million, and that's detailed in Appendix D. Section 4.4 of your report just notes that, and members will have seen this already at individual committees and at the Executive Committee, that our focus now in terms of our monitoring process is on forecast. We have a new Fusion IT system, and it's very much based on forecasting any potential issues, overspends or underspends in year. And for the capital programme, that's about identifying whether or not we can take corrective action to either bring spend back in online or to accelerate another approved project from a future year into the current year to try and maximise spend in each financial year. So with that in mind then, section 4.6 notes the capital spend for the year being the 85.248, and the next section 4.6 notes that the forecast for the year is the 85.248. So we're looking to achieve full spend at the moment. And as we go through the year, things might change, probably will change, but we'll bring that to members' attention every period when we come to Executive Committee and then on to the forum with a bit more detail for you. In terms of section 4.8, we're noting actual funding received to the 14th of June of 43.214. So if I can take you to the appendices then, Appendix A starts on page 24, and this details the adjustments that were approved in the June committee, basically the base movements, things like the carry forward, as we talked about in the last report, so we're bringing that money back into the new financial year. We also have additional funding there in section 1.2 for any additional project funding that we've received either in the old year or into the new year that we're carrying into the new financial year, so that's 217,000. We've also brought in £1 million from reserves that was part of a previously approved package of funding for the Oracle HR Finance Replacement Project. And we've also brought in the Leisure and Cultural Transformation Fund. We had approval from the Executive Committee in May to bring in the first phase of those monies, so that's quite a substantial increase to the programme as well. We're noting down at section 1.6 there of that appendix, additional capital grant that we received in year, and it was for Playparks, but we already had quite a substantial amount of money allocated to Playparks in the year, and this is about setting a programme that's realistic and deliverable. So we haven't adjusted the programme for that extra money, but if we do manage to spend more, then we'll bring it in as appropriate. The next page, page 2 of that appendix, brings in the Hairmire Station Park and Ride project and notes the additional funding there from Transport Scotland to take us to an overall programme at that point in time of 4.6 million. So that's quite a substantial increase again to the programme. Appendix A, then page 2 and page 26, just shows you how then we've got from the original 49 million to the 73, which is our new base position. Appendix B then moves on to highlight the projects that were added in as part of the June committee. So these were exceptions that were approved by the committee. So we've got the Three Rivers Clydesdale Way project, the Shawfield Remediation and Development project, and also additional government funding for Active Travel Infrastructure Fund. Over the page we have the Housing and Technical Resources additional project, which is the SEEF Energy Efficiency Project. We're noting there's a number of photovoltaic panels at primary schools along with Fleet Services Depot. The next page, Appendix C, then takes us on to further adjustments that were approved by the August Executive Committee. So we've brought in the Roads, Carriageway and Associated Infrastructure Project. That was part of the amendment that came to Council back in February, and we're bringing in 1.8 million of that, and we'll do that every year for the next 4 years. We've also got playground improvements at Kirkstyles Early Learning and Childcare Centre, and then we've got additional funding coming in for the Education Growth and Capacities projects relating to the work being done at Our Lady of Lourdes Primary School, and also the additional spend incurred at the Jackton Primary School. Appendix D then just gives you a summary of where we're at, showing you the position across the resources, totalling the £85.2 million. Appendix D, page 2, shows you that in a bit more detail across individual services. And then Appendix D, page 3, shows you the funding package for the programme as it stands. And it also shows you the forecast spend, the actual spend at the 14th of June, and the funding that we received at that point. And that's the financials. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. If Derek, please.
Yes, Chair. I'll take you from page 33 then, the Build Executive Summary. And as at the period end on the 14th of June, I'm pleased to say there was no projects behind programme at that point in time. And moving to page 35, the non-Build Executive Summary, I'm also noting there that there are no projects behind programme at that point in time either. On page 37, the Roads Executive Summary, they're also noting that no projects are showing behind programme at 14th of June either. And that's the operational report, Chair.
Thank you, Derek. Julia, did you have a question?
Yes, Chair, and I've realised that I've come on screen before my turn, given I'm deputy on this forum. So if Councillor McAdams wished to go before me, I'm happy with that.
That's fine. So, Councillor McAdams.
Julia, thank you very much. You're so polite and I greatly appreciate it, but I definitely wouldn't have minded. So I'll be quick, I promise. There's two things I wanted to talk about. One was the Playpark money, and the second one was the Hare Myers Station Park and Ride. So I'll do that one first, Chair. So Appendix A, the second page of it, on page 25, it talks about the Hare Myers Station Park and Ride. So if I'm reading the papers right, of which please feel free to correct me, so there's a £2 million shortfall that should have been supplied by Strathclyde Passenger Transport, but they haven't. Therefore, the knock-on effect of that is we as an authority are, if we put the 2 million in, we are then liable that we have to pay the interest back, which is estimated, was it like, I don't know if it was 900,000 or if it was 90,000, I can't remember now, so I do apologise, per annum, until the balance is repaid, which we hope it will be repaid by Transport Scotland. And it says in the papers that, you know, that we're looking and working hard to get a letter of comfort from them, but basically it still hasn't been signed off. Also, that the expected date basically is like 3 years away from when we think that we'll actually get that money. So I was slightly confused as to why we thought it was acceptable in a cost of living crisis that we as an authority are acting as a bank for basically Transport Scotland, and that it's us that are then liable to pay back the interest for something that that needs done, and they know that, and that's why it was pushed forward at the time. So I'm happy to ask my Playpark Money question if the officers want to answer why we're acting as a bank for Transport Scotland when we don't even have a letter of comfort in place.
Thank you. Lorraine.
Hi, thank you. I guess, Councillor, what we're trying to do is to make this project work. It's a viable project. I think we all want the project to take place, and that's the solution that we have come up with as officers to try and make this project progress. In terms of signing off a contract, you talked about the letter of comfort wasn't in place yet. The contract won't be signed off until we've got absolute certainty that we're getting these monies in, so that we don't end up with a liability. In the longer term, this should only be short term. We're noting there that the funding would come in by 26-27. We would be hoping it would be coming in next year. So it would minimise the impact in terms of the financial cost of it. But I can tell you that negotiations are still going on. We're still having discussions, and we're hoping to take this forward. It is a big project, and it's bigger than I think we had originally anticipated, but we're committed to taking it forward, and we'll do what we can to try and facilitate that.
No, that's great, Chair. If I could just say, Lorraine, I greatly appreciate that, and thank you for the answer. It's a project I think we're all desperate to go ahead, so I greatly appreciate all the officers that are working on it. I would just basically say, from just a councillor's point of view, who's kind of, we're deciding on where people's money's going and whatever else, I would like it to be part of the agreement that Transport Scotland pay us the interest on anything that we have to pay for borrowing for money for them, because I don't think that that's money that could be spent in social work, or money it could be spent in education, or money it could be spent, on anything else. But it won't be, because even if it's looked upon as a relatively small sum, and if it's only like 300,000 or whatever else, that's still money that should be spent on the residents of South Lanarkshire Council, not basically not cushioning Transport Scotland. So will that be part of the agreement?
I can't tell you whether that be part of the agreement or not, because I don't know. All I can tell you is that discussions are ongoing at the highest level within the organisation to try and make this work. So I'll bring back anything further I get on that to the next meeting.
That's great, Chair. Thank you very much. Can I ask my other question, please, Chair?
Yes, sure, absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. It was just about the Playpark money, Lorraine. If I maybe missed a step, because as I say, I was off, so I apologise if I'm getting this wrong. So when that money came in originally from the Scottish Government, I'm pretty sure at committee what we decided to do was we were going to take that money and we were going to use it to employ somebody. And what they were going to do was they were actually going to look at all the play parks that basically were still in use, look to see what needed done, and then basically prioritize, do it in a prioritization, because obviously there wouldn't be enough money to do much, but that was why there was going to be another lot of money for another 2 years or 5 years, can't even remember. So I'm just kind of wondering, is it that, because I've not seen anything about the play park, so I don't think that we've had somebody that's done that job, that's assessed everything, that's prioritised it, and then basically has done costings, for the play parks, because I genuinely haven't seen that anywhere. And what I would say is that, if somebody higher up has made the decision that money's not to be spent on play parks, then okay, that's fine. I can't do anything about that. But I just kind of feel as if when we're giving money for something and we have children that, our halls are shutting, we've got antisocial behaviour problems, we've got kids hanging about the street, and they don't even have proper swings to sit on anymore. So I would just like to know why we're not doing anything with the play park money.
So I think maybe it's maybe getting lost in translation in terms of what we're doing here. We've already got an amount of money in the programme in 24-25, reflecting the money that we carried forward from last year to this year, so the 1.109 that's mentioned in section 1.6 on page 24. And what we're really saying is this extra money that's coming in the current year, we don't think we won't be able to spend it. There's only a finite amount of work that we can do. So we'll carry it forward and we will do the work moving into next year. It's just we can't spend £2 million in the 1 year physically in terms of designing and building the play parks. So it's not lost and it's not going somewhere else. It's the timing of it. In terms of your commentary, Councillor, about employing somebody and doing the prioritisation work and the design work, I think that did happen. I'm almost certain it did, and I'm sure a report went to Community and Enterprise Committee, but I can look for that for you. Or Elizabeth Ann's nodding, so she can maybe help me find that. But I'm sure there's something out there that went to committee and was approved as a plan for the play parks.
Thank you very much, Lorraine. And Chair, thank you very much. It's just because I was pretty sure there was something done, and it's just like, it'd be horrible to think there was a piece of work done and then it was sitting there and then we weren't doing anything with the money, you know, when we could be using it to fix up some play parks, you know, and give our kids somewhere to go at least. Anyway, Chair, thank you for your indulgence.
No problem. Thank you, Monique. Sure. Councillor Morris, did you have a question?
Yes, I did, and thank you again for your indulgence. The complexities of Confero that allows me to jump the queue is frustrating and unexpected at times. Item 5 on page 29 of the report, Appendix C, noting £7.2 million of borrowing for capital investment in roads, which was agreed in the administration's budget for this year. The approval is noted for the transfer of £1.8 million to roads, but without noting the in-year costs for the borrowing. So my question is, what is the in-year expected cost of that borrowing and the estimated total cost over the 40-year term, as I understand it?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so what this is doing is bringing in the 1.8 for the current year, and then we'll bring that in again each year for the next 4 years to take us to the full 7.2. As part of the amendment that was approved by Council back in February, we had noted a figure of, I think it was 480,000, that was the annual cost. Obviously that will be slightly different now that we're borrowing less this year and ramping that up, if you like, over the next couple of years. But that would be part of the overall loans fund pot that we are looking at in terms of our projected loan charges for the current year. So yes, in theory, I would expect it to be a lesser requirement in terms of the current year loan charges. In terms of your question about what it will cost over the 40 years, I can't remember that off the top of my head. I'll have to find that and come back to you. I think we've got two sums of money there. We've got the actual cash costs and then we've got the discounted value as at today's prices. So I'll get both of those for you to let you see and give you a bit of context in terms of the borrowing. But what I can assure you is the way that we're borrowing for this is the same as we borrow for overall for the council's assets, and it's a planned approach taking you across the 40-year period.
With your indulgence, Chair, if I could have a supplementary question.
Absolutely.
Just for my clarity there, so if 480,000 was the in-year cost for the total 7.2 million, the 1.8 million, can it be expected that the in-year costs are in the region of £120,000?
In its simplest form, yes, I would expect so, but I'll get that figure for you. Okay,
and that and can I also clarify that borrowing, is that at a fixed rate of interest, or is it linked in RPI to RPI?
It will be dependent on when we take the borrowing. So that's where it becomes a bit tricky. So that's why I'm saying it in its simplest form. Yes, you would expect that, but depending on
so it would be changeable according to
so we did that calculation
the interest rate or the RPI. So that's where obviously the interest rate is not interest rate.
Yes.
Okay. So that interest rate could go up or down, obviously, over the term. So we're looking at, in the region for this year, £120,000 of loan charges for £1.8 million.
Yes, what we'll do is we would take the borrowing at a point in time, and that would be the rate that we would borrow at, and that's what we carry on for the remainder of the term for that piece of borrowing.
Okay.
And that
Okay.
will probably be different to what we calculated back in February time when we were putting together the 480,000, because things will have changed from then to now. So it's dependent on when we actually take the borrowing.
So that's, yeah. So what would be the interest rate for this year? So that's quite significant.
Well, it's dependent on
Yeah.
when we take it, so I'd need to go and get
So
the information.
right. So okay. Thank you. If maybe that could be included in a future report. Thank you.
Yeah, is there any further questions? Councillor McAdams.
Thank you, Chair. Something Julia said there just knocked this into my head, and I just wanted to ask the question. Lorraine, see the Playpark money, and I know I'm coming back to this. Is it money that's ring-fenced in such a way that it can't be spent on something else? Because if it's like near enough £2 million, and I'm just thinking, are we not £2 million short in school transport? So is that not money that can be moved and used, and that would solve a problem, or am I being too simplistic?
The money we're talking about here is capital grant. So when you're talking about school transport, that's a revenue budget on a recurring basis. So no, it couldn't be used for that.
Okay, thank you anyway.
All right, thank you. Can we agree the report?
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mars. Okay, if we move on to item number 6, which is the Capital Budget Monitoring 2024-2025 Housing Capital Programme, pages 45 to 52, and I'll hand over to both Lorraine and Derek.
Thank you. So page 45 then is the start of that report, and in section 4.1 we're noting there that the programme for the year was 77.3 million. That was approved back in February, but as we touched on in the previous report, we have a carry forward of 5.2 million coming into future years, and 3.4 of that is for 24-25, so that gets added to our 77 million. In addition to that, as I'd mentioned before, the affordable housing grant from the government was reduced by 3.473, so that then comes out of the programme. So we're left with a programme of 77.248 million, and we note that in section 4. The budget and the detailed breakdown of the funding sources is in Appendix A, and we'll touch on that in a second. And at the top of at the top of page 46 in section 4.5, again we're noting here that we've got a forecast position for the year, and again with the idea of taking any corrective action if we're either over or underspending. So in terms of the housing programme for the year, we are predicting spend of 77.248, so full spend, and as at the 14th of June, 10.075 million of funding had been received. So if I take you across to Appendix A, you can see the detail there in terms of the budget, the forecast of 77.248 and the actual spend, and also the funding programme there, mainly coming from capital funded from current revenue, so from the housing revenue account, also prudential borrowing and government grant for new builds as well. And that's the financial side. Chair, thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine. Thanks, Chair. I'm taking members now to page 49, which is the executive summary of the Housing Capital Programme. And we're noting at that point in time that we are behind in 5 projects. And if I can take members across to page 50, most of these are on-site projects that have been late in delivering to the programme that we had set. So I'll go through them one at a time. Drumduff Sheltered Housing Complex in East Kilbride, and this project is behind due to a delay at the tender production stage and is now being tendered. The next one is conservation area windows and doors, and this is behind because of manufacturing delays, but it will still achieve spend this year. It's just behind getting started. And the next one is Lawrence Street Sheltered Housing Complex in Hamilton. Again, project is behind programme as a result of some additional structural and plastering works that we've discovered whilst doing the internal upgrade. Simpson Court is the next one, sheltered housing up in Uddingston, and it's an internal upgrade. And the programme is behind due to issues with door supplier. So that's just trying to get all of that in line before we start on site. And the last one to note for members is a Strother Hill project. We're calling it Zone C. It's an area that we're doing external fabric repairs, but we've come across more additional bird nesting and more ecology surveys that are being required, and that's delaying us from the progress that we would hope to make at that point in time. And these are the operational reports for a Housing Capital Programme, Chair.
Thank you, Derek. Do we have any questions? No questions? Can we agree with the report?
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mars. Moving on to item number 7, and that's the revenue budget year-end 2023 to 2024, pages 53 to 64. If you can hand over to Lorraine again, please.
Thank you. So again, this is quite a detailed report and it's quite lengthy. And I'm thinking the best way is to try and take you from the probable outturn position to where we ended up at the end of the financial year. I think that's the simplest way to do it. If I can refer you then to section 4, what we noted in terms of the probable outturn was a set of approved transfers to reserves totalling 23.9 million. And that included corporate transfers to reserves of £9 million. That was a break-even position for the council, and at the end of the financial year, we then outturned an underspend of 128,000, and that was after some additional transfers to reserves at the end of the year. So if I can take you through the movement in terms of the 128,000, and then we can touch on the transfers that were agreed at the end of the year as well. So table 1 then shows you the general services year end after transfers to reserves, and it shows you that across the resources there was a relatively minor movement of £58,000 from the probable outturn variance to the year end variance, and that's a relatively positive position across the sizeable resource expenditure that we have. The detail of that is shown in Appendix 2 and sections 2 to 8 across the individual resources. In terms of loan charges, we had a favourable position, or movement rather, of 751,000 from the probable outturn position, and that reflected the cash balances that were available to invest being higher than anticipated, and that's really from when we did the probable outturn in December time through to the end of the financial year. We make an estimate, but the pattern of spend and income does change, and that means that we were able to deposit more and get a better outturn position. And we also had a slightly higher interest rate on the deposits as well. In terms of corporate items, they are detailed in section 4.7, and you can see there that we had an adverse movement of 648,000, and table 2 notes where that movement came from. Just going through them individually, we had ALIO baseline excesses, sounds very technical, and it's really the level of charitable relief that we give to leisure trust properties, which is our ALIO, and that had moved by £125,000 by the end of the year. We also had Strathclyde Regional Council intromissions, again, very technical term, but it's really an arrangement that we have with Glasgow City Council, who administer claims and litigation for the former Strathclyde region authorities, and we had a bill at the end of the year of 730,000. The final substantial one was the non-domestic rates incentivisation scheme, and this is because we exceeded our target for growth or buoyancy, and we were allowed to retain 50% of the additional income we generated, so that helped offset some of the additional spend. In terms of council tax for the year, we had a minor movement, an adverse movement of 33,000 from the probable outturn, and that really covers the main movements. Section 4.9 picks up the transfers to reserves, and as I'd noted there, we had 23.985 million of transfers at the probable outturn, and we had transfers totalling then 26.223 at the end of the year. So a minor movement in the transfers to reserves, and they're noted in Appendix 4 for your information. I'm noting there in section 4.14, again, the year-end accounting adjustments between revenue and capital, just for your information. And again, for the 23-24 pay award, again, routing that through the capital programme to bring it into the revenue account. I'll pick up in the individual appendices in a minute, but we'll just touch on the housing position before we finish the main body of the report. So section 5 then looks at the housing revenue account position at the end of the year, and that showed a break-even position. But that was after a transfer to the HRA reserve of 360,000, and that's noted in section 5.2. The HRA budget had initially included a transfer from reserves, but because we implemented the loans fund review that was approved by Council back in February, the probable outturn position anticipated a transfer from reserves of 853,000. So the movement between the year-end position and the probable outturn was a favourable movement of 1.2 million. That's noted in section 5.3. And that was the result of a number of variances across the service area, but mainly additional rental income from new builds and purchased housing being greater than anticipated, and also the reduction in loan charges that we talked about. And these were offset in part by additional spend on repairs and maintenance during the year. If I can take you to the appendices then. Appendix 1 shows you the position across the council, resulting in the 128,000 bottom line. Appendix 2 provides more detail across the individual resources in terms of each of the individual movements, and it also picks up on the other items I talked about previously in terms of corporate items and council tax. Appendix 3 details the transfers to reserves that were included as part of the probable outturn exercise, so they've already been approved by members, and that's totals 23.985. And then the final appendix, Appendix 4, there in terms of transfers, is the additional transfers at the end of the year. And again, they were approved by members back in June, and are noted across the individual resources as appropriate. Appendix 5 then picks up on the housing revenue account and just details the position across the subjective lines, just as I touched on earlier, and again showing a break-even position after the transfers to reserves. And that's all for that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. Do we have any questions? Councillor McAdams.
Hi, thanks, Chair. It was under the recommendations, number 2 on page 53, and it was something obviously that us as a forum, they were asking us to approve the following recommendations. So this is the one that was an additional 0.174 million underspend, which fell from the adult and older people's budget for it to be delegated to the IJB reserves, which concerned me till I saw at the bottom of the report that, you know, it was earmarked for future care costs. So basically it was going to still sit within South Lanarkshire Council's budget, but obviously I'm making the assumption that it's still within social work, but basically, like, if it's needed, it'll be moved. But what I didn't understand, Lorraine, was how we managed to have an underspend, because it's like every day I seem to have cases, and it's all, a lot of them actually have been children that have moved into adult care that have disabilities, and it seems to be unless somebody can get the marking, which I'm not sure who made up the marking, that they are critical, then basically they're not getting money, or it's like greatly reduced. So, and people are being told, oh, there's not enough money. So I just didn't understand how we managed to have like a 0.174 million underspend on a budget that officers are telling me that there's no money there. So anything you could help me with would be great. And thank you.
Okay. Graham.
Thank you, Councillor McAdam. Sorry, I was just thought best place maybe to help answer this as well, just given my recent one with social work. So the There was an amount again approved at probable outturn in terms of an underspend, which was agreed that would remain within the adult and older people budget delegated. So this was an additional 174 again between probable outturn and year end. And the main reason for the underspend was really the early achievement of some savings that were approved for this financial year coming, 24-25. So you'll be aware of the size, obviously, of over £20 million just in terms of the IJB that had to come off their budget moving into the new financial year. And the 174 was really just some things that had kind of happened in February, March time, just as a result of, you know, things having to be implemented so that those full year effect of those savings could be made. So it was really just the difference in the timing of some of that coming into effect, and the fact that that budget would then be obviously removed permanently going forward.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McAdams. Are there any other questions? And can we agree the report? Oh,
With your indulgence, Chair, I also have a question.
Absolutely fine.
Thank you. Just on the point that Councillor McAdams raised on the underspend on the IJB, can I clarify when you note in year savings that due to events in February and March, are you specifically speaking to the closure of Dewar House and McClymonds House care homes?
No, it's not related to those. As I say, the care homes, in terms of, obviously there was a specific plan for those that was happening in 24-25 if approved. This was more in relation to the management actions. There was a part of the 20 million savings that related to management actions and other things that were being put in place, as I say, as a result to try and manage the budget going forward. So it wasn't anything specifically still to be approved by the IJB. As I say, the 20 million was made up by, I think it was about £7 million that was management actions, with the 13 million balance still to be approved by the IJB, which was approved at the end of March. So it was really on that kind of early intervention type stuff and the part year effect, I suppose, of that was then earmarked of how to balance the budget for the following year.
Thank you. Thank you. Chair, if you're content, I'm certainly content to second and agree the report.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Councillor Mars. So as it's hit 3 o'clock, if we're going to take a 5-minute break, and we'll come back at 5 past 3, if that's all right. Thank you. Okay, welcome back, everyone. So if we can move on to item number 8, and that's the Revenue Budget Monitoring 2023-2024 Detailed Resource Analysis, pages 65 to 142. And if I can ask Graham Booth to take us out.
Well, I'll be kind to Graham and I'll pick that up today, and he can do it next time. This is the year-end position, the variance explanations and the trends across the individual resources, and they start on page 67 for community enterprise resources and run through each of the individual resources to the end of the year. Chair, I'm happy to go through them one by one, or just take them as a whole and allow members to ask any questions if they've got any, just because it's old year data and there's quite a volume in there. I'll take your guidance on that.
That's absolutely fine. Do we have any questions with regards to this report? No questions? Okay, can we agree the report?
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mars. Okay, if we go into the revenue budget year-end 2024-2025, pages 143 to 148. Lorraine, please.
Thanks, Chair. So this takes us to the new year position for the current financial year to the 14th of June. This report really starts in the main in section 4, down the bottom of page 143. And we're noting there that as at the 14th of June, we have a projected outturn position on the general services budget of a break-even. And again, this is focusing on the forecast for the year, as their plans are in terms of moving forward. So sections 4.3 onwards provides detail on a number of key budget issues for members' information. So these were reported to the Executive Committee last week. So section 4.3 notes the position in terms of teacher numbers, where we have had notification in terms of the allocation of teacher numbers across Scotland will be distributed via specific resource grants. And those grants are conditional on meeting or maintaining teacher numbers. Our share is 9.379, and the government have indicated that they will consider mitigations, and that any reduction in funding will be proportionate. So if we dropped by one teacher, we wouldn't lose all the money, we would only lose the proportionate amount for one teacher. We have sent a further letter to the Scottish Government in relation to the Council's position, because we do believe that we have two main areas of mitigation in terms of this, and that's around the Council's own investment using our own money in early level teachers, which were recruited for a 2-year fixed term. So that's artificially inflated our base position, if you like. And also nationally, there is a reduction in the number of newly qualified teachers compared to last year. And again, that's impacted on us in terms of the availability of newly qualified teachers coming to the council. So again, not something within our control. Because the leaders' discussions have concluded that councils won't sign the grant offer letter that restricts the use of funding, and further engagement is being pursued. The second one there to note is employer pension contribution increase for teachers. The teachers' contribution increased on the 1st of April, but as yet we don't have funding. It's an estimated 5.5 million, but we do expect to receive funding from the UK Government to the Scottish Government, and we expect to have that passed on to councils. And the final area there is in terms of school meal debt. It's just for information. National school meal debt funding of 1.5 million was announced by the First Minister. We have looked to submit a bid for that, and information on the bid and its outcome will be provided to members when known. Section 5 picks up on the housing revenue account position, and again shows a break-even position for the coming year. In the appendices then, Appendix 1 shows the position across the general fund. You can see the forecast across the resources, and you can also see the year-to-date actual on the right-hand side for information. The next page is the housing revenue account, and again showing a break-even position for the year, with a year-to-date actual on the right-hand side. And that's all for that report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Lorraine. Do we have any questions? Councillor McAdams.
Thanks, Chair. So I'm grateful to COSLA for them taking the discussion and moving it forward with the Scottish Government and saying that there will be further engagement. I'm also grateful to our officers for putting together this report, and because I think it does make things very clear, and it now makes things more understandable to me after watching the executive committee the other day, where it seemed to be when they were talking about school transport, and it was like, well, if you're not doing school transport, as in like cutting that, you know, there's going to be, you know, teachers' numbers cut or classroom assistants. I basically now understand from reading these papers how, you know, we're going to be in severe difficulty as it is already, if basically we lose the 46 full-time equivalent in the early years and the 28 full-time equivalent for the newly qualified teachers. I hadn't had that information before. So it was just to say that I don't think it's a great situation that we're in, and I think that it would actually help the public and keep them more informed, so that they actually knew that this was the situation that we're in as local authority, that, you know, even if we do everything right, you know, it might actually, there might still be problems, you know, with teacher numbers. So I just think that we need to be very clear about that. The other thing was, it was the school meal debt, Lorraine, and I know that you had said, you know, that when there's a plan, they'll let us know it. I just kind of felt the wording in the document wasn't great, because it was like, you know, officers are considering a bid submission. I didn't think the wording was very clear. So am I to take it that this is at the very start of the process, therefore they don't have like a project plan for what it is that they're going to do? Because it doesn't really tell us anything.
Hello. Yes, you're absolutely right, Councillor McAdams. This was at the start of the process, probably written a number of weeks ago in terms of for the Executive Committee last week, and this report just falls off the back of that. We've noted their applications are due to be submitted by the 1st of August. It's my understanding that has happened, but I will clarify that for you. And this is about bidding into the National Fund, so justifying why we need that money, I suppose. So I've not been party to it myself, but colleagues I know between Community Enterprise, Education and their Finance Transactions team have been involved in that. So I'll drop you a wee line to let you know what's actually happened.
Much appreciated, and thank you as always.
No problem. Thank you, Councillor McAdams. Have we any other questions? No. No. So can we agree with the report?
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you very much. If we go into item number 10, and that's the Revenue Budget Monitoring 2024 to 2025, Detailed Resource Analysis, pages 149 to 200. And Lorraine.
Thank you again. So this is the resource by resource position in terms of the financial position, the variance explanations, and then the trend statements. So I'll just go through them one by one, and members can just chip in if they have any particular questions. So Community and Enterprise Resources then starts on page 151. What we can see in the greyed out box there is a projected outturn, which is a break-even position for the year. And on the far right-hand side, we can see a year-to-date actual spend of £22.3 million. The variance explanations are shown from pages 152 to 156. And as this is the first report of the new financial year, there are no underlines because all of the explanations are new. And I'm happy to take any questions from members if there's anything they want to pick up on. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine. Is there any questions on that part? No. Okay, if we can move on. So the next resource then is Education Resources, and that's on page 161.
The variance explanations for education are on the following 2 pages, and they're probably areas that you would expect to see across the resource area. And again, I'm happy to take any questions on those. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine. Are there any questions? No? Okay. Take us through the next part, please.
Finance and corporate resources then is the next resource. So again, in the greyed out box, you can see a break-even position for the resource for the year, and the actual spend on page 169 is 17.2 million to the 14th of June. The variance explanations, again, are all new because it's the first one this year, and they're on page 170 and 171. And again, happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions on that part? Okay, there are no questions. Okay, if you can take us through the next part, please.
Thank you. So page 175 is your housing and technical resources. And again, an annual budget of 13.584 and a full projected outturn for the year. And spend to the 14th of June of 10.716. The variance explanations are shown overleaf on pages 176 and 177. And again, I'm happy to pick up on any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions to that part? We've got no questions. Okay. Lorraine?
The next resource we would normally pick up on is in Appendix E, but there are no variances to report from the housing revenue account side just now, and we touched on that in the report earlier anyway. So if I can move on to social work, which is on page 187. And that's showing again in the greyed out box forecast for the year on full budget with some minor variances across the service areas, but looking to manage that across the piece. And the variance explanations are shown in page 188 onwards, taking us through to page 195, I think it is. Yep. So again, happy to take any questions on those ones.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions on that last part? No questions? Okay, can we agree the entirety of that report, please?
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mars. And if we go into item number 11, there's no items of urgent business. So I'd like to thank everyone for coming to this meeting, and the meeting is now closed. Thank you.